down Stratton from As Wood Turns. For some time I felt like I needed a steady rest for my lathe. Steady rest for when you're turning a long, deep vessel. It starts to have a lot of vibration, you want to steady it out. Now, I've researched it for some time and I've decided that there are three main types. There's ones that have a bar on the top and the bottom and rollers on that. They're maybe not so much of a steady rest, but it has actual support. I would use one of them when the work is so big and so heavy that the chuck cannot hold the work all by itself. Then I'd definitely go for one like that. The next type is a donut that goes around the workpiece and has arms that come in to support the work. These are nice. They were initially very attractive to me, and you see quite a few of them. But my problem is that they surround the work, which makes them harder to put on and put off. And the commercial ones are expensive. Now the third type I found in a book by Doc Green, Fixtures and Chucks for Wood Turning, and it came pretty close to what I felt I needed. It's a steady rest, and his version is a lot like this. He had a two-wheel version and a one-wheel version. Now, I don't like the one-wheel version. I like the two-wheel version. But what I really wanted was one that would steady the work from both sides of the workpiece. So I really needed to have two that would fit together. And I couldn't just make two of that design because they would be offset and wouldn't be in line. So I changed it. And I made it so that the base, the post that supports the rollers, is offset from the part that holds it onto the lathe bed. And that then gave me an opportunity to put a tenon in here, a matching tenon on the other side, so that the two can come together, and one can be coming from one side of the lathe, one from the other side of the lathe, have the work steadied on both sides. You'll see that when I'm finished. So first, let's make the base that actually fits onto the lathe bed. The size, every lathe may vary, but this has to be long enough to support the post, provide that for the travel for your lathe, for your radius that it will take, and then something to hold it together. So essentially, I made an L-shaped piece, 3 layers of Baltic birch plywood glued together, and then routed a space for a tenon and put a tenon in between. Also routed a 1/4 inch groove for the adjustability. So that's fairly simple and fairly straightforward, but got to have something to tie it down to the lathe bed. So for that, I made a knob out of Baltic birch. You could buy one if you wanted to, but if you do, get one that's low profile, because this is right where the work would swing by. You want it as low as possible. Now, I've glued the head of the bolt into the recess here so that it won't get away from me. I don't like to use wrenches in this plot. So that goes in from the top. Then there's a spacer as thick as the lathe bed is. For me, this is 2.5 inches. And the bottom part that will actually cinch it up. For my lathe, this is 2.5 inches so that it will fit down between the bedways, and then 3.5 inches so that it can turn and wedge in place, so that you can put it in the middle of the lathe bed and not have to insert it from the end. So let's give it a try. Let's take the bolt with the knob, put a nice big washer on it, insert it through the base, another washer on the other side, spacer, and then the bottom, in effect, elongated nut. I used a T-nut in the bottom here because if you use a hex nut and it gets away from you, it's down there in all the sawdust that is in shavings that's always underneath the lathe. It's always a pain to find it. Use a T-nut. So let's see if this works. We've got it all off here. Line it so that the width goes in first. Give it a little more space. It goes in. Wiggle it a little bit. Twist it. Cinch it up. We've got a base. So now because you've because we really want to get to the fun part where the wheels are, go ahead and make your supports. We need 4 of these in the end. The trick here that makes life a lot easier, since these are all rounded off in weird places, is to use double stick tape. Stick all 4 of them together, drill them all at the same time, cut them out at the same time, sand them all at the same time so they're exactly the same size. I don't know about you, but I can't sand to the same shape every time. So do it all as a group. For the wheels, you go to your local thrift store and buy a pair of roller blades. So with those all shaped in, let's put them together. And the wheels spin nicely. Well, we're going to have to take this apart again because we've got to put the other post in here. Now we get to the critical parts. I've used 3 layers here of wood, the outside supports, and the center, which is mostly an L shape. And then there's the part that pivots in here, and then the upper part that fits on here. So, again, for these outside ones, cut them, tape them together. You need 4 of them. Tape them together, get them sanded, and go ahead and drill the whole support here. And I'll give you the dimensions. The critical measure here is that this thickness of this piece, the thickness of this pivot piece, have to be the thickness of your wheels that you sourced. So if yours are different, adjust accordingly. So I went ahead and glued these pieces together, and I would go ahead and put this in and assemble it right now. It's not the way I built it, it's what I thought of it later. You always learn the best ways to do things when you're done. Now for the post. Before I glued the sides on, I went ahead and drilled a hole and put in a T-nut on the other side. This is for fine adjustments later on. Now, when you put this T-nut in, this is the weak part of this Baltic birch plywood. Make sure you pre-drill the holes for the prongs, or grind them off and glue it on. Then go ahead and assemble this together, put this in place, but don't drill this upper hole. Again, do not drill this upper hole yet. What we're going to do now with this assembly made is to put it on the base, move your your live center over to your headstock, should be the same Morse taper. Put this up to here, line it up, give it a little tap so that you can mark the exact spot that you need this top pivot hole. Then that will perfectly align it to your lathe, and that is critical. So then now, with that done, now we can do the final assembly. So then with this partially assembled, go ahead and put the pivot on, put its washer back on, washer's on the other side, and there's your completed post. All that's left now is to screw it to the base. We're off and running. So now in use, we'll use these as pairs so that it dampens vibration from both sides. Bring up the other piece, put them together with the tenon, adjust them to your work, lock them down, make your fine adjustments for tensioning with this thumb screw on the side. So I like this steady rest, obviously, because I made one. But it has its limits also. Again, if the work is too heavy to be supported by just the chuck, you're not talking about a steady rest. Move up to another style that will actually support the work better than this one. This is to steady the rest, dampen it from both sides. So, this is Alan Stratton. Be sure to like this video, make one for yourself, adapt it to your lathe, and good turning.